So, it's 1985, and there's a killer on the loose in LA, the Night Stalker that everybody's terrified of, except, of course, Maxine Minx, a former adult film star turned Hollywood darling, or at least she hopes to as she attends auditions in Hollywood. Maxine is looking for her big break. She wants to get out of the adult industry and into the formal Hollywood star industry. And even though there's this guy in the loose, she's not going to let that get to her. What might get to her is a mysterious message from her past when a VHS tape arrives at her door one night with footage from an investigation in Texas. Yes, that movie X that came out just a couple years ago is hot on Maxine's trail. And though she might be able to escape the events of the film, she may not be able to escape her destiny. This is following Pearl that came out, just last year, I think, from Ty West.
2022 from both of them.
Yes, 2 years ago. God, it's hard to believe those both came out in the same year. It was a wild thing getting to the end of X and seeing a teaser for Pearl. It was a wild thing getting to the end of Pearl and seeing a teaser for Maxine. This weird, wonderful trio of horror films that Ty West has put together have finally all come out. We've seen the end of it now, and I'm very excited to talk about what happens. No spoilers, of course, here on this podcast, but we'll keep it tight for you. Andy, what did you think of Maxine?
So this was a lot of fun. Ty West has so much style in his movies, and the previous two were movies made in a certain style. X is the 70s exploitation film. Pearl is in the style of that Gone with the Wind kind of classic cinema, super saturated, bright colors. And Maxine is the 80s B movie slasher film brought to life. We have a lot of fun characters. We have a lot of characters in this movie. There's a lot of plots going on. Some people might say there's too many, but we have these fun characters of like the Night Stalker is going on. People are getting murdered. She's trying to make this movie happen. There's cops asking questions. There's a detective trying to find her. She's got her lawyer / agent / whatever, played brilliantly by Giancarlo Esposito. It's a lot of fun. There's just so much going on, and I've been so excited for this. Lots to talk about. There's some things that I think don't quite work. It's got some issues, but overall, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, Maxine is really a funny sort of feature because it has to ride in on the precedence of its previous two entries in the franchise, right? X comes out and it is this like almost cabin in the woods style horror, or I should say cabin in Texas Chainsaw Massacre horror feature, big slasher send up, right? Exciting, visceral. Pearl comes out and it's this like huge throwback to like the royal loyal days of Hollywood, right? Like bright colors, Wizard of Oz, like 1930s, like very exciting. And now Maxine doesn't have the luxury of a set built in New Zealand, right? We do not have the house that we can return to from the two previous entries. We have to be somewhere new. We have to be somewhere different. Where does Ty West go with this? I think a lot of people have been on the timeline saying it doesn't work. It's too weird. It's too odd. The third act doesn't stick it. I disagree. I think this movie's cool. I think this is a unique send-up of B movies. I think there's something special here. And I think that Ty West has dug into what has made his career work to this point and partnered with Mia Goth to make something that I believe time will be kind to. I think people will look back on Maxine and go, actually, that was kind of a cool movie. There's some really cool ideas in here. And although it is different, I think it has to be. And I think if you know that going in, you're not going to be disappointed. I don't know where the best place to start talking about it is. I don't want to get too much into the plot, but I do want to talk about this like neon-soaked 1985 Hollywood, where it is like everybody's full of cheesy lines. And being LA, of course, everyone's an actor, everyone's an actress, and Maxine Minx finds herself uniquely separated from the rest of the world because she's involved in the seedy underbelly of Hollywood, right? She works at a strip club during days, and during nights she's shooting footage for other stuff that we can't talk about on a podcast. And then like just in between that, she's trying to get in and audition wherever she can. She's got a friend who works at the local video store, right? They watch goofy old horror movies on VHS. She's got friends in the industry who are trying to invite her to big parties up in the Hollywood Hills. She's not doing any of it because she's going to be a star. it's her destiny, right? Like that's the way it's going to be. This like driving force of us running with Maxine towards greatness is kind of a fascinating thing because she's got a sordid past. If you've seen X, you know, like she comes from a place where maybe we should be looking twice at her. And she ends up being this really fascinating character that's got this presentation. She's performing for other people and she's performing for us. Like, I think that's a really exciting thing to kind of step into because we haven't seen Maxine in a couple years, right? She's not in Pearl. Like, Pearl is about functionally a different character. The spirit of the protagonist, I think, is the same through all of these, but the place and the people are very different.
Right. It's a town that will chew you up and spit you out. She meets Elizabeth Bender, played by Elizabeth Debicki, who's the director of this film that Maxine has won an audition to, and she's kind of mentoring her, and she's telling her like, you just got to be fierce. You can't, you only get one shot at this kid. You can't mess it up. And there's an interesting parallel where Maxine is trying to go from adult films into mainstream, and Elizabeth Bender, the director, is trying to go from these kind of sleazy B movies into more mainstream films. Like she says, I want to make a B movie with A ideas, she says early on. And so it's an interesting parallel where they're both trying to make this kind of career shift. But Maxine is dealing with a lot of death. There's people dropping like flies around her, which is what gets the police involved. There's like some people that work in her industry turn up dead. Is it the Night Stalker? You're the common denominator. What do you know? The police are played by Michelle Monaghan and
Bobby Cannavale, right? Cannavale.
And they're it's so great because so much of this movie is archetypes, and like, so you have these two hard-nosed detectives, and it's a great comedy bit because they're doing the 80s cop thing, trying to be rough, trying to play good cop, bad cop. That's an interesting storyline. You have Kevin Bacon playing the PI who's on Maxine's on her trail, he's almost the best person in this movie. Like,
it's amazing.
He is chewing the scenery. He's got this thick Louisiana drawl. I'm after you, and you better come home with me, darling. He's so good in this, and there's a mystery that, like, part of what this movie is. It's a mystery of who's pulling the strings, who's paying the PI, who's killing the people, who's going on. So there's a mystery going on in the background, but we have a really great cast of characters and a lot of plot lines kind of interweaving. It may be a little bit too many. It kind of depends on your own interpretation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed a lot of the comedy in this movie. Like, I know it's a horror and that comes with it, but Maxine is like uniquely positioned where Pearl didn't have so much room to do that. X is funny, I think, where it needs to be. Like, part of its trappings of this like adult film crew like coming to this house is, sets up some situations, but Maxine is like really funny. Like, Bobby Cannavale as Detective Torres like has all these like absurdly goofy lines. He's like this hyper masculine guy. At one point he's talking to Maxine and he's like, "Well, you look like a broad at a bus stop," or so. Like, it's so goofy. And meanwhile, like, her agent Giancarlo Esposito has like this horrible wig on purpose. And it's like so nice to see him not playing Gus Fring for a change, right? And like playing this like seedy agent who's like smoking cigarettes, and he's on his exercise bike in his office with a stupid 80s headset. And yes, Kevin Bacon might be like, he might steal every scene he's in. He's so over the top. I swear it's the best acting I've seen Bacon do in years. He absolutely understands the assignment. He is supposed to be this like hyper reflection of a PI. Everybody in this movie is. There's this great scene early in the film when Maxine is walking down Hollywood Boulevard and she passes these 3 storefronts, right? She's just come out of her shift working at an adult theater, we'll say. And she walks by 3 storefronts in a row. One is a bunch of dudes doing karate, like right at the window. A bunch of guys in gis, like punching. Next one's army recruitment. Bunch of guys going to war, right? Like signing up, we're going to go be men. And the last one is a bunch of televisions in a television repair shop that are all running footage of the evening news, and they're talking about this Night Stalker character who's relatively central to the plot, I think, in theme and tone and spirit. But as far as like the actual Night Stalker, you don't have to worry about them till later in the film, thank God. We spend a lot more time with Maxine with what she's got going on and her hustle. But I like that this world features people who are like turned up. You know what I mean? Like just like Maxine and her friends are like hyper feminine. A lot of the dudes in this world are hyper masculine. Everything's turned up. Everything's a little over the top, and everybody's performing because like it's Los Angeles and everybody's doing a performance. Even Bobby Cannavale's inspector character talks about, oh yeah, I wanted to be an actor and performing and like. It's goofy in like just the right way. It manages to sit in this place of tone that is comfortable and welcoming and uniquely different from the other two in the franchise, rounding out what feels like a really good horror trilogy. Like I'm surprised at how many people said this one doesn't stick the landing, because I think it totally does.
Right, I think so as well. I want to talk a little bit about Bobby Cannavale has got this great recurring gag where he plays bad cop, and he just kind of goes over the top, starts yelling. And then when Maxine leaves, his partner's like, "Nah, it was a little over the top." It's like he's acting. He's like still acting even as a cop. Let's not forget that this is a horror feature, and the horror is that there is someone killing people around Maxine. Couple of her friends end up dead. There's some grisly murders, 80s style gore and slashing going on. So she's trying to stay alive and also shoot this movie, be there, learn her part, show up on time, all those things. But we get, it's not really scary, but it is, again, it's more stylistic. It's about the 80s. Her friend lives or works in this video store / sex shop, and he's reading Fangoria magazine. He's got a bunch of VHS tapes. Like, he's totally like that stereotypical like horror nerd of the 80s and of today. But we it's kind of fun, campy horror. It's not super scary.
No, and I like so much of the set dressing too. Like you may have heard in interviews or seen in the trailer, like a brief flash of like the Bates Motel from Hitchcock's Psycho. That actually has a bit of a feature in here, which is kind of honestly like a clever reflection. If you can't get the house from X and you can't get the house from Pearl, what other like thing could we kind of send up in this movie to like give it some tone and give it some shape? And like getting the house from Psycho is pretty rad, even if it's like part of a studio tour thing, which I think speaks to the subversive nature of this film as a presentation of film. This movie is a presentation of B-movie ideas and B-movie culture and old horror. I love the video store. Yeah, with like its goofy neon lights and like Andy said, like the adult section in the back, which is really funny. There's even a great sequence where Kevin Bacon's PI character kind of chases Maxine through like a bunch of back studio lots, and they're like running through like a town square, and then they run through like a couple of skyscraper building, like just real goofy, like, and just really feels a bit like a movie about making movies, not in the way that Damien Chazelle's Babylon does, but I think in a way that is meaningful to Ty West and Mia Goth, who produced this feature. Like between the three of them, I can't believe how far we've run with what otherwise I thought was just going to be a one-off horror movie, X, starring Mia Goth in 2022. Like it's crazy. Like I can't believe how far we've come. Oh, great music, by the way. Great needle drops and great soundtrack.
It's really interesting how much cinema plays a part in each of the three stories. In X, it's this they're shooting adult films, and that's they hope to make it big, to not do let's get our foot in the industry this way and then kind of move on from there. In Pearl, she meets the projectionist played by David Cordsweat, and it exposes her to her first cinema, and she sees those girls on screen and she says, I want to be that, I want to be dancing up there. And in this, of course, she's gone in the movies now, she's taken the next step. So it's a really interesting way and kind of love letter to film and cinema.
Yeah. I don't want to say too much more about it. I think I about said my piece. Andy, any other thoughts for recommendations?
Just some criticisms I've heard. It's interesting because some people have absolutely loved Maxine. Some people saying it's the best in the series. Some people saying it's the worst in the series. Some people saying it's the worst movie of all time. Some people the best movie. Like it's been very kind of divisive, and it's interesting to see where people rank. Some people are like, "Oh, Maxine is first, or Maxine is second, or Maxine is third." It's really different depending on who you ask. I think my only criticism is there's a few too many plot lines going on. We have Maxine, winning this audition. We have the Night Stalker. We have the police. We have Giancarlo Esposito's character. We got the PI. So there's a little bit too much going on. I think it will probably work better on rewatch when you kind of understand how all the threads fit together. But it is that LA remind me a little bit of Mulholland Drive, in some ways that LA noir style kind of film.
Yeah, and I like that each one feels uniquely on its own, but when you watch them later, I think I'll be drawn to checking out more. I immediately walking out of it, especially with a lot of the like running around the backlot stuff in this feature. I thought a lot of the Back to the Future series, right? Robert Zemeckis trilogy of films, and those are obviously very different. Those feature the same characters going to different places, but the idea of going to like different places in different times and different settings and having the same like core set of beliefs and same kind of ideologies running through all three of your movies like fits here. And just like when I watch the first Back to the Future film and want to immediately roll into the next two, I feel that this October, when I'm doing my horror movie rewatch and I hit X, I'm probably going to roll right into Pearl and then just want to watch Maxine after that. Like they feel intrinsically connected, but perfectly fine apart, I think. Actually, I'd say that, but I take it back. I do think you should probably watch X before you watch Maxine. I do think you are benefiting from that. Yeah, there is some pretty direct correlations between those two movies, whereas Pearl kind of stood on its own. If you haven't seen X before you go see Maxine, not required, would recommend if you have the ability, I think. And also, it's just a good movie and it's a good time. So with that, any other thoughts or recommendations, Andy?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Maxine?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this all year. We got lots of style. We got Ty West back doing his horror thing, doing tributes to the 80s, to cinema, to slashers, to B movies. Mia Goth is incredible again as Maxine Minx. We have a bigger cast than we've had with Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth Debicki, Giancarlo Esposito, Lily Collins, Halsey. So many people. It's a lot of fun. There's a little bit too much going on at times, but like I said, I think that might get better on rewatch. But highly recommend, especially for horror fans.
Yeah, same boat for me. Would recommend. I think it's a good time. I think people on the timeline who were like, Maxine doesn't make it. Oh no, a blunder at the end. Wrong. I think you're looking at it all wrong. I didn't know what to expect exactly when I walked into Pearl. I didn't know what exactly to expect when I walk into X. And I think some people maybe walk into Maxine with expectations. And like I think if we've learned anything over Ty West making these three movies is that you shouldn't expect any one thing from any of them. They're all doing something different. They're all saying something new. I think it's exciting. I think it's been a great body of work. I'm a little bummed, honestly, that I'm not going to get to see Mia Goth reprise this role or this character anytime soon. I never say never in Hollywood, but for what it's worth, I'm excited to see what Ty West does next. I'm excited to see what Mia Goth does next. Stunning end to a stunning film franchise. Rock solid work in Maxine. And now we got to talk about some trailers. Couple upcoming ones. Excited to get to these. These trailers drop this week. I'm going to take the first one. Andy's going to take the second one. Then we will jump into Problemista. Andy, what do we call this segment?
It's time for the trailer park.